from us for now. We'll go ahead and get into it. So we hope you enjoy. Please welcome your first speaker, myself, Cody Dearing.
Hidden messages, meanings, and conspiracies. Ladies and gentlemen, Cody Dearing.
This is your last chance. After this, there is no turning back. You take the blue pill, the story ends. You wake up in your bed and you believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill, you stay in Wonderland. And I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. Remember, all I'm offering is the truth. Nothing more. There's a film class that I remember taking in college that at the time I thought was total bullshit, but I eventually came around on it some. The course was a requirement for UT film majors called Narrative Strategies. The course description that someone was paid to write reads, "This class focuses on the study of how meaning is structured and perceived through the aesthetics of audio-visual images." Basically, we would watch a movie or a TV show and we would talk about what the creators, the actor, director, or content itself was trying to say. Why the director made the choices they did, whether or not their doing so was an attempt to communicate something. For example, we might watch an old movie together and the teacher would suggest that the reason that the lights were down low and we were only catching glimpses of the lead character obscured through one of those old partition accordion room folding divider things that women used to change behind all the time in old movies, they'd suggest the reason that we couldn't see the character behind that right now is because they were feeling uncertain and unclear. So the director was consciously choosing not to let the audience see them clearly. Hundreds of dollars I paid for this class. The part about all this that I took issue with particularly was that the class would be asked to write these essays interpreting the films. But it didn't matter what you made a case for as long as you backed it up with something from the work. It's something you consider to be evidence supporting your theory. It didn't matter what the director was trying to say. It was more about how the observer read it. So we would watch films like this documentary about Disney movies being problematic for a number of reasons, and 20-year-old me would think, but maybe they weren't trying to reinforce gender stereotypes, or perhaps they didn't mean to be so blatantly racist. The Little Mermaid isn't supposed to be about how you should give up everything for the person you love, and Beauty and the Beast isn't intended to encourage people to deal with domestic abuse. Did Beast ever hit Belle in that movie? I don't remember, but regardless, you can make a case for those theories from those films, I think. So intended or not, I think there's definitely validity to those readings. The idea that the audience gets to read your work in whatever way they please can be a troubling thing. But does that matter? Is putting the work out there only the first step and every person is then free to read the work whatever way they choose? I mean, that sounds right, but it also sounds more like handing someone a coloring book than a photo album. And it reminds me of one of the reasons that Dave Chappelle gave for walking away from the Chappelle Show. I can't recall which interview I heard this in, which again makes for a great research essay. But I remember Chappelle talking about seeing some racist person turn his sketch that was intended to be against racism and using it to further racism. I think it was the sketch about the blind racist who doesn't know that he's the race that he hates, and someone, somehow Dave saw maybe on the internet comments or something, he saw some racist idiot be like, yeah, stupid other racist, when the intent of the sketch was the opposite of that. And it seemed to bother him, which I understand. Because if you create the content, you're on some levels responsible for its impact, and yet I think there are some people who are going to read the world the way they want regardless. It's hard to say how responsible creators are for the unintended readings of their works, or perhaps if you handed the same aforementioned racist idiot a blank piece of paper, they would come back with a similar racist reaction. So how, if at all, responsible are the Beatles for Charles Manson's murders, right? That he listened to Helter Skelter and the White Album, and he thought the lyrics confirmed his own. He was like, they're singing about my ideas. It's clear everyone is on the same page. So if this is indeed true, would there unfortunately be some validity to the claim that the Beatles had some influence, however minor, in the murders? I think it would be unreasonable to hold them accountable. But a question worth pondering. When it comes to the intended readings of movies, TV, etc., it's important to remember that there exists at least the possibility that creators are trying to say something with their work, either about the movie itself, about the world at large, even a simple wink to the audience like Easter eggs in a Disney movie. Finding Nemo shows up as a sticker in Toy Story 3. In the 1977 print of The Rescuers Down Under, there's an image of a topless woman in a window in the background during a chase sequence. And it used to, I guess the film rate used to not show fast enough that they didn't think it would show up, or the animators didn't think someone found it, but they released a printing of that and had to recall it, the 1977 version. For you, all of you looking for one picture of a topless woman in the background of a cartoon. Mufasa's face looks like a lady's butt. Look it up. A clothed lady, sort of copper tone butt sort of thing going on. Knowing that messages exist cause people to look for them and sometimes see them when they aren't there. Those previous examples of Disney Easter eggs seem like conscious efforts, whether or not they were meant to be found, at least in my assumption. And beyond just Easter eggs, there are other ways directors might be trying to communicate with the audience. They might hide in plain sight clues about the truth of the film, like watching M. Night Shyamalan's craftsperpiece, The Sixth Sense, the second time and realizing there was evidence all along that Bruce Willis was dead, and you just didn't notice because M. Night pulled one over on you. Or perhaps maybe it might be something more along the lines of a real-world truth the director is trying to get across. Or maybe they're making some sort of social commentary. There's a fantastic documentary on Netflix right now called Room 237, full of varying theories about Stanley Kubrick's The Shining and what it's really about. From it being an admission that Kubrick faked the moon landing, as evidenced by things like Danny's Apollo 11 sweater he wears while playing on a carpet that looks similar to a NASA launch pad, to another theory which suggests that it's about the slaughter of Native Americans in the awakening from the nightmare of history, pointing to Native American imagery used throughout the movie and Danny and Wendy's more earth-toned wardrobe in contrast to Jack Nicholson's red, white, and blue wardrobe. My favorite theory posed by Room 237 was mention of a supposed rivalry between the film's director and the author of The Shining, Stephen King. The theory points to a scene where Dick Halloran is driving through a snowstorm. He's trying to get to the Overlook Hotel, and he passes a car wreck, and he sees a red Volkswagen that's been crushed by a semi-truck. In the book, The Shining, the main character drives a red Volkswagen, but in the movie, the main character drives a yellow Volkswagen. And so the theory suggests that this was Kubrick saying, "Fuck you" to Stephen King. This movie was his vehicle, and he was going to do with it what he wanted. So if Kubrick were still alive, we could ask about the true meaning and intent behind his films, and still, I think it's important to remember that the audience doesn't need to ask. We're free to interpret a work however we please. And in those interpretations, we find a lot of fun as well as a lot of replay value. Movies, TV, and other media can be given new life in the sense that you can watch them through new filters and glean untold variety of meanings from them, intended or otherwise. Sometimes unintentional readings become popular theories that take on a life of their own and become urban myths. Going back to the earlier category of examples of Disney Easter eggs, there's a myth that in The Lion King, the word sex is spelled out by some dust that poofs out into the sky when Simba lays down, right? The animators indeed put something in there. They meant to spell SFX, and people read it sex. So there are also a number of alleged hidden boners in Disney movies, most of which have been debunked. So these are mostly debunked boners. But there's also the, right, like in, what is it? The Little Mermaid, the priest is like standing, he's marrying them, and he's supposed to be standing on a box. And the joke is that it's his knee coming up, and you see his knee, but people are like, that's his boner. The animators did comment on that one. There's another one, that the alleged whispered phrase in Aladdin, good teenagers, take off your clothes. Has anyone heard of this one? They actually say, come on, good kitty, take off and go. But that's what people wanted to hear. That's what they say it was. So though these myths are easily refuted by a mere moment of Googling, it's not unlikely that you've heard of one or more of them, perhaps. Be it through the grapevine, or maybe you read a BuzzFeed listicle one day while you were bored at work. These theories can be, if nothing else, interesting to consider. So one final concept I wanted to mention was also And also one that I learned in UT's Narrative Strategies film course, the idea of intended dual readings, as I know it. The example I like to use to explain it is Tim Allen's current show, Last Man Standing. The description of this show on ABC's website, if you're not familiar, which again, someone was paid to write, reads, Tim Allen will return as Mike Baxter in Last Man Standing, a show about everything that families are dealing with today. All of it. All filtered through the blunt man's man comedy of an iconic American dad. Mike continues to be surrounded by forces seeking to challenge his ideas on just about everything in which he strongly believes. This show is genius in a way because you can watch it as a man's man and think, oh, these ladies and liberal dummies don't get it. They just keep trying to change Tim Allen, but he's a man's man. Or you can watch it and think, Tim Allen's a fucking asshole who doesn't listen and just doesn't get it, right? If intentional, this tactic is genius. And if the theory is then true, both readings, though essentially the opposite of one another, are equally valid in my opinion, which again reminds me of being in the narrative strategies class thinking that it was dumb. If you can make a case for anything and that was all it took to give it validity, it's just one piece of evidence and it was valid. Valid in what way? I suppose just for consideration, because under closer inspection, a lot of these theories don't hold water, but a theory doesn't have to be true to be a theory. It just has to theorize. And when we look at the intended messages versus the unintended messages, it's hard to say which is more important or valid or true or whatever qualifying word you want to use. The creator puts their truth into the work, but it may not be the same truth that the observer takes from it. And that's okay, in my opinion. So with all that in mind, for your consideration, here are some of my favorite theories about popular movies, TV, video games, and music. Okay, sure, we'll start there. Dark Side of the Moon, right? It syncs up with The Wizard of Oz. When the two are played simultaneously, there are parallels between the two that you read. I recommend watching it on YouTube, where the audio is synced up for you, and there are little pop-up video style things that point out the coincidences for you. I also recommend drugs for that experience. All right, video games. So there's a theory that Super Mario Bros. 3 is all a play. The game starts with a curtain rising. The platforms that you traverse to get through the level are all bolted to the background. You can see them casting shadows on what should be the sky, and then every level ends with you exiting stage right? Offset? There are a multitude of theories surrounding popular movies, and one that has been confirmed is the director of the original 1987 RoboCop confirmed that he intended to portray RoboCop as a Jesus-like figure. Quote, it is about a guy who gets crucified in the first 50 minutes of the film and then is resurrected in the next 50 minutes and then is like the super cop of the world. He also points out that the character's somewhat un-Christ-like violence as a deliberate, since RoboCop was meant to be the American Jesus. Another theory, which has some confirmation, I think, is Spider-Man's web fluid he sprays from his wrist represents... Okay, so writing this, I struggled. Deciding which word to use here. I really want to say spooge to break the tension of this and make it less gross, but we're mature researchers, scientists. So Spider-Man's web fluid he sprays from his wrists represents semen. There apparently exists an unused Spider-Man movie script written by James Cameron in 1991 containing the following scene where Spider-Man wakes up and something is causing the bedsheet to stick to him. He lifts it, revealing a sticky white mass completely covering him, gluing him to his bedding. It's some silky substance webbing him into the covers. He cries out in dismay, struggling to free himself from the gluey strands. Where did it come from? He notices his wrists. They're oozing a pearlescent white fluid. So the Cracked article that was my initial source for this went on to explain, one day, Peter's taking pictures of a pretty classmate, Mary Jane Watson. While gazing, enchanted at her beauty, he's bitten by a spider. The next day, Peter's body has changed. He's developed muscles in new places, but that's just the beginning. His body started producing sticky white stuff. The audience watches with vague feelings of discomfort as this teenage boy spends a long time trying to figure out exactly how to produce the newly discovered fluid, nervously telling his aunt to go away when she knocks at the door. I think that's a pretty compelling case. So we can't talk about conspiracy theories without mentioning 9/11. There are a lot of theories that suggest certain movies were trying to warn people about 9/11 before it happened. I watched a delightful video online which pointed out that Back to the Future's Twin Pines Mall, where Marty meets the Doc before the Doc is gunned down by terrorists. In the future, it's the Twin Pines Mall becomes the Lone Pines Mall. The shot of Marty first arriving to the mall is at 1:16 a.m., which of course inverted is 9/11! In The Big Lebowski, the dude is seen writing a check for Half and Half, dated September 11th, 1991, while George Bush can be heard talking on the TV in the background. Ooh. In The Big Lebowski, as well as host to a number of other interesting theories, my favorite of which suggests the movie is all imagined by John Goodman's character, Walter. Reddit user El Jefe Veterano explains, quote, Walter Sobchak has been severely affected by childhood trauma, predisposing him to PTSD while serving in combat in Vietnam as a young man. He now sits around at a bowling alley talking to himself and bowling alone. The main narrative and subplot of The Big Lebowski are all formulated in Walter's imagination. Walter was raised Polish Catholic. It's been established that Jesus represents Catholicism and exposed himself to an 8-year-old. Perhaps Walter suffered religiously inspired and or sexual abuse while his family was active in the church at a young age. This may also partially explain a strong urge to remain Jewish, as he is fearful and resentful towards Catholicism. During interactions with Jesus and Liam, Walter usually remains silent and maintains a sort of stoic, intimidating posture, or is it bravado, covering his paralyzing fear? Ultimately, my opinion is that Jesus and Liam represent two church officials from Walter's past. Liam and me, we're gonna fuck you in the ass Wednesday, baby! Jesus is obsessed with asses. The dude and Donnie may represent two aspects of Walter, the dude being his ideal. Donnie represents Walter's childhood naivete. He is constantly out of his element, always confused, easily frightened, and anxiety-ridden. Donnie is only at peace when he is bowling, and the rest of the world is just muffled background noise, which is why Walter always wants to fuck it and go bowling. So there are quite a few theories, actually, that fall into the it was all in their imagination category. Some suggest that Ferris Bueller's Day Off is all in Cameron's head. The theory that sparked my interest in writing this essay was one about The Simpsons that seems to have originated by, again, another Reddit user. Hard to pick a name. So, quote, at the end of the 1992 episode Homer the Heretic, during a conversation with God, Homer inquires about the meaning of life. Homer is insistent that he can't wait until he's dead to find out, and God says, you can't wait 6 months? 6 months later, on April 1st, 1993, in the episode titled, So It's Come to This, a Simpsons clip show, Bart shakes up one of Homer's beers so much that when he opens it, it violently explodes, tearing the roof off of the Simpsons house and sending Homer to the hospital. At the hospital, Homer is crushed by a vending machine, and that sends him into a coma. The episode ends with Homer waking up the same day, choking Bart, but the theory suggests that Homer never woke up from this coma, and that every episode since then has been a dream. The episodes before April 1st, 1993, are said to have more grounded plots. Homer tries to give up drinking. Marge considers cheating on Homer. Lisa has a crush on her teacher. Bart takes an IQ test. But the episodes after April 1st, 1993 are said to take place in Homer's imagination. Homer becomes an astronaut. He goes into space. He meets countless celebrities. Mr. Burns catches the Loch Ness Monster. And this also may suggest why no one in Springfield ever ages, though they experience birthdays. So, listen to that stone cold silence in this room. It's the sound of blown minds. All right. So moving on, two more here that I want to mention. One is the most debated theories from my adolescence from Pulp Fiction spawned a number of theories regarding what the glowing contents of Marcellus Wallace's briefcase were. Some people believe it to be the diamonds stolen from Tarantino's previous film, Reservoir Dogs. The most common theory suggests that the briefcase contains Marcellus Wallace's soul, saying that the logic being that the combination is 666, and that's why the first shot of Marcellus Wallace is the back of his head with a Band-Aid on it, allegedly the location on your body where your soul is removed from, according to multiple sources on the internet. Quentin Tarantino has admitted that in the original script there were diamonds in the briefcase, but as this was too similar to Reservoir Dogs, he decided to change it. When Samuel L. Jackson asked Tarantino what was supposed to be in the briefcase, he said, whatever you want it to be. Admitting that the briefcase itself was merely a MacGuffin intended to move the plot forward, and the choice to leave the contents unknown was a conscious attempt to create mystery, inviting the audience to create their own theories. My favorite of which takes into consideration Tarantino's musical literacy and carefully hand-selected music for his films. It theorizes that the briefcase actually contains rock and roll. The briefcase is, quote, the briefcase is rock and roll. Marcellus represents the origin of rock music in America. Blues, Motown, soul, etc. Jules is Chuck Berry, and Vincent is Elvis. They go to get the briefcase back from the nerdy white guy who's trying to steal it. Maybe they represent record producers. The reason the guy that unloads a gun on them is unable to hit them is because legends of music can never die and will be around forever. Pumpkin and Honey Bunny from the diner, they represent the British invasion, and they also try to take the briefcase. Jules lets them leave with the money, but he keeps his bad motherfucker wallet. Butch, the boxer, being told by Marcellus to throw a fight, represents new and interesting rock music, allegedly, that continues to come out, and Marcellus doesn't like this. Butch and Marcellus are captured by rednecks while a country song is playing. The rednecks are said to represent country music, which also took from the blues. This is shown by them. Marcellus, Butch has a chance to escape, but he decides to go back and save them out of respect. Marcellus agrees to let Butch live, and they establish a truce and go their separate ways. So it's rock and roll in their theory. There's one final theory that I'd like to mention was my personal favorite from my research, and it involves beloved 90s sitcom Full House. Someone on the internet by the name of W.G. Nards created a chart showing the genetic likelihood that 3 blonde-haired, blue-eyed girls will be born from the genes of brown-haired, brown-eyed Danny Tanner and his deceased Greek wife, Pam, who, if you'll remember, is Uncle Jesse's sister. And although she came from an overly stereotypical Greek family, she had blonde hair. So the theory suggests that it would have been highly unlikely, albeit possible, for Danny and Pam to have produced 3 blonde-haired, blue-eyed girls. However, this result would have been much more likely if the girls were actually the daughter of Pam and blonde-haired, blue-eyed Joey Gladstone. That's right. This would explain why Joey, Danny's old friend from school, gives up his entire life having a place of his own to help raise 3 young girls. He's just a friend. He's doing it because he wants to have some part in raising his illegitimate children. That theory might sound crazy, but accurate or not, watching Full House through this dark lens has brought new life to the show for me. It's entirely different, and my reactions are as real and as fresh as they ever were during any original viewing, and things only get deeper when you realize that the third housemate, dark-haired Uncle Jesse, and his brunette wife, Rebecca Donaldson, also have 2 blonde-haired, blue-eyed baby boys. So, next time you're watching a movie or something on TV or anything, really, remember that your imagination and your own interpretation also play a part in the equation. The truth is out there, and it's trying to find you. Info Warriors, thank you.